Thanks for joining me in this segment of Belly Flopping into Mysticism. Today, this is just even weird for me. I mentioned I get a lot of weird connections, goofy synchronicities, or just odd stuff. About a year and a half ago, I was telling some stories. I was talking to one of my neighbors involving a story that involved her cat. And she's like, wow, that's kind of weird. And then I shared a couple more stories and she said, oh, that's spooky. And I'm like, no, it isn't. It's fun. And a few days later, I was talking with a friend of mine on the phone. We only talk a couple times a year. And he's like, that's spooky. And I'm like, no, this is fun. But there are a couple stories that are a little bit spooky or a little deeper and kind of weird. So in the last segment, I shared about the connection of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and the song Carry On Wayward Son, which I associate to my brother Jeff, and how the opening verse, the first verse of Carry On Wayward Son, talks about rising above the noise and confusion, getting a glimpse beyond this illusion, and flying too high, which could be interpreted as Icarus, the man who strapped wings of feathers or wax, flew too high, the wax melted, and fell into the ocean and drowned. So a couple days after Halloween, well, a few days before that, I actually decided to write an article based on that story, filling it out a little bit more than what the YouTube channel or the YouTube segment described. So I had written the draft, had done some editing, had it pretty well polished. And a couple days after Halloween, I was coming across town, decided to stop into a store. And as I walked up to the main entrance, there along the side, kind of around a little corner, kind of where the entranceway comes out, I saw a pigeon, and it was the neck was twisted a bit. It looked pretty uncomfortable. It was breathing really shallow. I didn't know if it had been attacked. I didn't know, if it was in shock, if it would recover with a little bit of care. And so I went into the store and I said, there's a bird out here that is kind of odd. Do you guys have any kind of towel in the back room, or maybe a box that could wrap it up in, and because I didn't really have anything in my car. And so the manager on floor was very nice and came out to assist me a little bit, went back into the store to get a small box. And as soon as I had wrapped it in some cloth and, picked it up and cradled it a little bit, it got a jolt of life to it. It held its head normally, and it was taking deeper breaths. It had been shallow breathing. Now, one of the reasons I was thinking, gee, I should, see what I could do for this bird is that back in 1999, shortly after I moved to Montana, I was driving down from the mountains and saw that it looked like a small bird had been hit, much smaller than a pigeon, just a little, I don't know, sparrow, I don't know what kind it was. And it was lying in the middle of the road. And I thought, oh, geez, it looks like it's still alive, because I could see a wing moving. And I thought, oh, geez, what condition is it going to be in? So I pulled over, grabbed a sock out of my sports bag, and I looked at it, and it didn't seem to have anything broken. It was breathing. It looked like it was in shock. So I picked it up, was going to take it home, held it close to my body as I drove. And after I'd driven 3 or 4 miles, it came to, and it tried to fly in my car. And so I pulled over and kind of scooped it out, and I watched it just fly off a couple 100 meters before it flew off over the top of the trees. So I thought, well, maybe that's something birds, when they're in a state of shock, if you can pull it out of that state. So here I was with this pigeon, and we'd looked online and learned of a man who lives across town who cares for pigeons, and he was willing to take a look at this bird. Well, so I get in the car, thanked the manager, get in the car, had to drive a few miles across town, and the bird died while I was on the way over. By the time I got over, I was pretty sure, it wasn't blinking, it wasn't breathing. And so he took it out of the box and he said, are you sure? And he poked it a little harder and he said, yeah, it's dead. And he had told me over the phone that sometimes there's a disease, and I'm trying to think of paramoxavirus is what it's called, that affects pigeons and leads to their death. And so he said, it may be that it has this disease, and if so, it is much more difficult to treat. And so he held the body of this bird upside down, and sure enough, fluid came out of its beak. And he said, yeah, that's a really strong sign that the bird had this disease. And then he said it basically drowned. Now, at the time, I didn't make the connection. It was a few hours later, after I'd posted the Icarus Cuckoo's Nest video, that I realized, wow, I literally came across a bird that drowned, not in the sense of falling into water, but drowned in its own processing of, the biological processes dealing with this disease. But how weird is that? I'm sorry, maybe I shouldn't laugh, but I was like, man, that's weird even by my standards. And it was the next day I was still thinking about this bird, and kind of, here I'm writing about, I'm seeing connections between flying, one flying over the cuckoo's nest, the myth of Icarus tying in with Carry On Wayward Son, which I associate to my brother, and then literally coming across a bird that in a sense drowned. Now, I was thinking of that as I was getting in my car, and I turned on the radio and was surprised to hear the song by Dave Matthews Band, Crush. Now, to most people, that's not terribly significant, but to me it was, because back when my brother died in 1999, my parents and I went to Las Vegas, and we ended up going to where he died. And after we went there, when we got in the car, that song was playing, Crush by the Dave Matthews Band. And it was actually at the chorus, which finishes, am I real, or is this real, or am I dreaming? Now, around the same time as this was happening, I'd actually written a draft to an article dealing with the conflict between what gets called reality and illusion, which again ties back with Carry On Wayward Son. But just that song, I hadn't heard it in, I don't even know how long. I mean, I'm sensitive to songs because so many of them have meaning to me. It's been at least several months, if not a year or more, since I've heard that song on the radio. And again, it's the timing of it, it's the context of it, that to hear that song that I associate after my brother, my wayward brother in a sense, died, in that context of thinking about a bird that drowned and the relationship to Icarus. I don't know, a couple days after Halloween. It's a little spooky, but I also think it's very rich, and I'm thankful for it. I joke with my friends who were both English teachers that sometimes my life is like living in an English class, interpreting some of these myths, nuances, symbolism. But to me, they come together in this interesting, meaningful way. And a lot of that came after going through this breakdown, breakout, breakthrough process that I experienced. So, weird even by my standards. Thanks for watching, and yeah, I still can't get my head around it. So yeah, have a great day. I hope you found something of interest, and talk to you again soon. Bye.